The topic of this presentation is ADL and IEDL in pediatrics. This will be a quick presentation with just a few key objectives. After viewing the presentation, you should be able to identify the factors that influence ADL and IEDL performance, articulate the role of OT in facilitating participation in ADL and IEDL, specifically within the pediatric population, and describe the relationship between IEDL performance and community living. Before diving into the presentation, take a minute to think about how you perform ADLs and IEDLs, such as those listed here, like bathing and dressing, toileting and grooming, laundry and clothing management, grocery shopping, food prep, eating, financial management activities, and health management and maintenance. You'll have an opportunity to discuss your thoughts with classmates in class this upcoming week, but kind of consider the differences that may exist between how you engage in these particular activities and how others might engage in these ADLs and IEDLs. Alright, so getting into the presentation, development of ADL skills begins in infancy with skills such as breastfeeding and continue through early childhood and into adolescence. Children learn ADLs at different rates based on environment and culture, including factors such as parental expectations, values, social routines, and the child's physical environment. OTs play a role in ADL development in the pediatric population by collaborating with caregivers and children to modify activity demands and routines in order to enhance ADL performance, as well as to address client factors that will help the child to perform ADL more independently. Participation in ADLs helps children, including children with disabilities, to develop better body image, self-esteem, self-determination, and sense of autonomy. When working with children on ADLs, it's important to remember that repetitive ADL routines, such as bedtime routines that occur every night, are heavily embedded in family culture and environment, and these routines impact how ADLs are performed. Expanding on the idea that many factors may impact how a child develops ADL occupations, let's continue by considering how client factors, performance skills, environments, contexts, and activity demands may influence ADL performance. Body structures and functions fall under client factors, as you guys all know. So consider how issues like tactile hypersensitivity, let's say, think about how that might impact a child's ability to wash and brush their hair. Or consider how something like lack of strength may impact a child's ability to button buttons. Things like the child's interest level, motivation, and health status may also impact ADL performance. In regards to environments and contexts, there are four main settings where youth typically complete ADLs: at home, at school, in the community, and at work. For the personal and temporal context, consider how ADLs typically develop in a sequence, and the level of parental involvement in ADLs varies based on what stage of development the child is in. You may not think of the social environment as having a big impact on ADL performance, but family members, other significant adults, and even peers can provide encouragement and support a child's level of independence with ADLs. A child's social routines may also influence when and how ADLs are taught to a child. Not only is it important for an OT to be aware of the cultural beliefs of the child, but to also be aware of their own cultural beliefs regarding ADLs in order to provide culturally sensitive care. In addition, culture will influence the type and availability of tools, equipment, and materials that can be used for ADL performance. Lastly, activity demands can impact ADLs, and this is where task analysis really comes into play when helping facilitate a child's ADL development. Activity demands can vary from one environment to the next and have the ability to impede or support quality of ADL performance. I thought Case Smith, the chapter in Case Smith for this week, had a really nice quote summing up these concepts and the role of OT on page 418. There was a comment that stated that once the OT understands the context in which the occupation occurs, intervention strategies congruent with the demands of the activity are chosen, or aspects of the environment that are barriers to the child's performance of ADL tasks are modified. A very important ADL that can often get overlooked is sleep and rest. It's critical for health and well-being, and if a child is not getting adequate sleep and rest, occupational performance, including ADL performance, can be really negatively impacted. Asking about sleep should be a part of every OT evaluation in the pediatric population, and really any population for that matter. Some common problems related to sleep that you may run into when working with children include resistance to bedtime, difficulty falling asleep, frequent nighttime awakenings with difficulty falling back to sleep, irregular, inconsistent sleep patterns, snoring, excessive movement, or overall low sleep quality, and sleepiness during the day. While it's important to know when to refer a child to other professionals, such as a pediatrician or a pulmonologist to address sleep issues, OTs can also provide helpful interventions to improve sleep and rest. Areas to address could include helping the family to establish healthy bedtime routines and habits, or modifying physical aspects of the environment to facilitate sleep. While children begin to engage in IADLs as early as their toddler years, with things such as throwing food in the trash can or putting away their toys, the expectations for youth to participate in IADL obviously increases as they approach adolescence. IADL are the most complex aspects of daily living that children and youth develop as they reach adolescence and begin to participate in their community with more autonomy, and they'll continue to develop confidence with IADLs into young adulthood. IADLs also serve as important preparation to live independently in the community, as IADLs and community participation are integrally related. Successful living in the community is often measured by an individual's ability to work, reside within the community, and participate in community activities. We know from research that youth with disabilities are less likely to live independently in the community. So OTs can play a critical role in enhancing IADL skills in an effort to increase youth's ability to live and participate more independently within their communities. Self-determination is a key factor that promotes independent living, and that's a concept we'll be exploring more in the presentation on transition that you guys will listen to next week. Pages 463 through 466 in Case Smith Chapter 16 offers an overview of common IADLs at each stage of development and common interventions that can be used to facilitate IADL performance. I'm not going to go over each of these on the slide here in detail because you'll read about them in the chapter, but know that opportunities to practice IADLs and gain independence obviously increases with age, and common interventions include coaching, the use of visual supports, role-playing, and the use of technology. Just as there were several factors that could potentially impact ADL performance, the same is true for IADL performance. In regards to personal influences, like client factors, the individual's interests, preferences, and motivations will influence the IADLs they participate in. OTs working with adolescents would benefit from using a client-centered approach to identify areas of interest for their adolescent clients. And it should be no surprise that the physical environment, social environment, and cultural environment will affect IADL performance. In addition, technology has the potential to play a significant role in the performance of IADLs, especially as clients approach adolescent age. From a temporal perspective, again, think about how life stage will influence the type of IADLs being performed, as well as how the time of the year might affect IADLs. So for example, a teenager may have the responsibility to mow the lawn in the summer, but that expectation obviously won't exist in the winter if they live in a place where it snows. Service systems and policies may also influence IADL performance. For example, inclusive after-school and recreational programs, as well as accessible transportation, will enhance IADL participation for youth with special needs. Family and client-centered involvement in decision-making are key aspects of planning and implementing interventions to address IADL performance and community participation. Client-centered practice can include connecting families to support groups and facilitating development of self-determination and advocacy skills. In addition, OTs using a client-centered approach must acknowledge that adolescence is a time of rapid physical and psychological changes. It's critical that OTs working with this age group acknowledge and appreciate the growth, changes, the new interests, increased independence, and physical development, and how all these things can help build self-esteem. Families can often struggle with the thought of their adolescent becoming a sexual being, and this can be especially true for families of a teenager with a disability. OTs can play a key role in helping families and teens during this period of development. And in addition, OTs can help families and youth with disabilities to explore possible avenues for the future, as well as help the child develop a sense of disability awareness as they develop their own sense of identity. Ecological models can also be used because of their emphasis on adaptation and environmental modifications to facilitate participation in IEDLs. What other models or frames of reference or theories that we've learned about this semester can you see also being used to address ADL and IEDL performance in youth with special needs? So that wraps up this presentation on ADL and IEDL performance in the pediatric population. Just reviewing the objectives, this presentation identified some factors that can influence both ADL and IEDL performance, discussed a little bit about the role that OT can play in facilitating participation, and briefly touched on the relationship between IEDL performance and community living. Thanks for listening.